Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, it's good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
I guess you stayed glued to your TV last night and watched all those debates, and you're now an expert in the political scene.
I did watch the debate, I have to say. Yes, I did.
Well, I watched some, but it's pretty tough. But I got the gist of it, and I sort of sensed what was coming. And one headline that struck me today is "The Winner." Unfortunately, I thought Rand did pretty darn well, and he took a different position on foreign policy and personal liberties than the others. But nobody claimed he won, but nevertheless, he did well. The winner has been declared. Fear itself is winning, and it looks like the media is winning, the demagogues are winning, the politicians are winning, Donald Trump is winning. His polls keep going up. And at the beginning, Blitzer made the announcement that anything that doesn't relate to terror is not part of the program tonight. We want to talk about the real important things. So the whole world has a problem economically, and wars going on around the world, and we have Federal Reserve problems and all. But tonight it has to be the fear of somebody attacking us, which is a very serious thing and something we've warned about for a long time. But it seems to me like the American people are disgusted. They don't like their government. The majority don't. And they're looking just for somebody to help them figure this all out. And so unfortunately, instead of turning their attention to the government, I feel fearful too. I'm fearful of our government, because the more they talk about fear and the more they talk about change in definitions of collateral damage and things like this, I fear that our government is going to do us more harm. I sensed, as many freedom-loving people sensed after 9/11, that our greatest threat would come domestically, and that certainly has been the case. So fear is a driving force, and I'm sure that you've given that some thought.
Well, you know that as people tune out of the mainstream media, they tune away from CNN, they're desperate, I think, to hold readership. And selling fear is a very effective way of doing that. When people are afraid, they'll tune into CNN. They want to find out what's happening. So I think there are some ulterior motives here as well. People turn to the media, and politicians benefit from it too, because when people are afraid, they act irrationally. They look for protection in places. And I think there's definitely some other interest going on in pushing this idea.
You know, one of the complaints I've had is the Bush doctrine that we can initiate war, you know, this whole thing, preemptive war. And yet the other thing that they have talked about was, not unintended consequences. You know, the collateral damage.
Yeah.
Collateral damage. That's generally was considered bad, and they tried to hide it. But guys like Trump, especially, are saying that we need to change the definition. Collateral damage just is a way you win wars. So he says you should go to the families because they do care about their families. Can you think of anything more atrocious of that? Of course, going to war is pretty bad, but this whole idea of changing this whole the whole definition of a word and saying that collateral damage, I don't sweat it. You know, that's part of it, and that's the way you win war, because they're bad people and they love their families and they might pay attention to it. Never stopping to think that maybe there is a problem of retaliation for an attitude like that.
And there's also the problem of losing your moral compass. You know, I thought the real lowlight of the show last night, of the debate last night, and it really was disgusting, is when Hugh Hewitt, who's just one of the most repulsive neocons on earth, he turned to Ben Carson, the doctor, and he said, "Through your skills as a surgeon, you've saved a lot of children's lives. Would you have a problem slaughtering thousands of children overseas if necessary?" And he said, no problem at all. And I just can't believe we've come to this sort of horrific.
Well, that's a bipartisan attitude. Madeleine Albright showed no, compassion when they asked her about 500,000 children having died from our constant bombing in the 1990s, which led up to 9/11. She said, "Well, that's the price you have to pay. That's the price you have to pay." So that's that to me is an attitude, no moral compass whatsoever.
And Trump, we talked about this several shows ago, the idea of enabling acts. And I sort of got this sense when Trump was talking about, we've got to kill the families, we've got to go after these families. And he said, why? Well, because our country's out of control. That's kind of a Reichstag thing, you know. Our country's out of control, all the rules are thrown out the window.
Well, you know, we're talking about the fear and the foreign policy and how does it affect us domestically. Well, we saw that this week, 2 days ago, or yesterday, it was, where the LA schools were closed. And that was not a minor matter. Over 1,000 individual schools. They have 640,000 students, and they say, don't come to school. Well, some did come, some stayed at home. How did they manage it? But a similar hoax was played on the New York schools, and they sort of paid attention, so they didn't chase everybody home. Which, in a way, you have to have a little bit of sympathy for people put in this position, but we have to realize that this is all concocted, you know, and so much of the problems we have today with the threat of terrorism is preventable. But still, the overreactions, they've gotten, a few people in this world have gotten us so we're terribly frightened of our own shadow.
I think this may sound strange, but I think people take a sort of perverse pleasure in feeling that we're threatened because it sort of spices up otherwise pretty dreary lives that a lot of people have. But I was looking at some of the comments on the New York City or the LA school district story, and I think this sort of captures everything right now. One of the commenters said, "It's awful and terrifying. I'm afraid it is going to be the new normal."
Yeah, the new normal. I know what that one is. But I read one comment of somebody that made more sense than the whole school district. And it was a 16-year-old that showed up at school, and I guess he didn't get the message soon enough. He shows up, so he goes up to a policeman, and the policeman tells him what's going on. And his main question, is this going to mess up my schedule for taking my exams? I mean, he was down to earth. He's coming to school to learn, take his tests, and get promoted and all. But no, we have to look at these big matters. And but the consensus here by most of the candidates, not all of them, except for the one, is that the purpose of government is only safety. And it bothers me. Yes, we should be safe, but maybe we can be safer in a free society. Maybe if you can freely own guns, you can feel safer when you live in your house. So safety is not the prime purpose of government. The prime purpose of government is to protect our liberties. But how often, I wonder how many times they even said that last night. Probably not many. It was always scaring people.
Yeah, I don't remember. Liberty was almost a 4-letter word last night, I think.
Right. And, the comparison, compared to what? That we have to be scared because 14 people were killed, which was a tragedy, which was, as far as I'm concerned, preventable, with certain changes in our policies. Which is a horror. But does that mean we turn the world upside down and treat it like it was a nuclear bomb attack? And yet, this year already, our police, that's the government, shot 161 unarmed suspects. So, but nobody seems to, well, there is some expression there, but in comparison, no. I mean, in comparison, this is a much, much bigger deal. But also, the war in the cities, the war on drugs, how many people die from that? And it's preventable. Don't have this stupid federal war on drugs, which is, way out of control. And there's thousands that are killed there. There's, like in the inner cities now, there's close to 50 people die every night. So, in comparison, and it's day in, day out, morning to night, it's been saturated TV, and then CNN gets up there and say that's the only issue that's really important.
Because they've been shoving it down their throats for weeks and weeks.
But it's not important to talk about what is this principle of blowback? Could there be any truth to that? And do they get asked those questions? No way.
And there's such an intellectual disconnect among most of the candidates because given the terrorist threat, what do they recommend above all? Do more that's causing the terrorist threat. And one of the articles pointed out, how can more attacks overseas make us safer at home? Nobody addresses that really.
And it actually, makes us less safe because, that's the motivating force. The one guy, one of your favorite senators, and he's running for president by the name of Graham, he's out there, trying to get this balance. Most Muslims are good people, and we don't like the way Trump talks about them because that might anger the Muslims. And here's a neocon. How many years has he been doing it? A couple of decades, aggravating and precipitating war and saying we should be over there and doing more. And then he has the audacity, of course, what Trump does say does make it worse, but to think that Graham gets off scot-free and isn't a major participant in aggravation.
Yeah, it's okay to go ahead and kill them, but just don't say rude things about them.
That is it. That's what they want to do. But it looks like this is not going to change. And when I think back on this throughout my lifetime, there were times that were a lot more serious. Although I remember World War II, and I don't remember reading exactly about this, but we had Nazi submarines off our borders. And then in '63, when I was in the military, we had confrontation with the Soviets with missiles in Cuba. And there's been a lot of problems going on. We had, went through a Great Depression, and yet they want to say that what we're facing today, dealing with the threat of terrorism, is the biggest threat ever. And therefore, everything has to be directed to that, and we have to be willing to give up our liberty. And one of the most popular things I would say in the campaign, and get good applause from at least our college friends, is that you never have to sacrifice liberty for freedom. And yet the government and the politician always said, there is no other choice. You have to do it. You have to have either or. You cannot have liberty without the government, taking, you cannot be safe without the government taking away some of your liberties. I don't believe that is the case. I think if you have a system that's designed to protect liberty, we're going to be safer. We're certainly going to be a lot wealthier, and we're certainly going to have less friends. We're going to have certainly less wars if we understood that. But non-intervention in the three areas, non-intervention in the personal lives of individuals, non-intervention in the economy, and let voluntary associations work just as they do in social matters, and non-intervention in foreign policy, that's the road to peace and prosperity. It isn't beating the drums of war and building up this fear and demagoguing the issue. And I blame two sources for this mostly. Flawed policy, of course. But the ones who beat the drums are the media, as well as the politicians who are trying to get an edge. Politicians last night were trying and begging and pleading and arguing to get an edge over how tough they would be no matter what kind of liberties they sacrificed. I hope that American people wake up and realize that is not the purpose of government. The purpose of government is to protect our freedoms. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and please come back soon.